Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I am really excited for today's episode because it's something different than I tend to do or talk about. I tend to work very deeply with men's inner worlds. And there are times in our coaching work together where we look at, appearance or the external, but mostly it's in terms of, body language and facial expressions and all of those things. And so I have an amazing guest with us who really works more with external presentation. She is a style consultant, and she has archetypes that she works with men especially, to help men convey their intention and their purpose through their clothing. So Catherine Griffin, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm excited to dive into this and see where there's this overlap between the inner and the outer worlds.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here and excited to discuss this concept more thoroughly.
Yeah, me too. So, like I said, Catherine is a style consultant and has been doing this for the last 5 years, one-on-one and in groups, but she's also been, a buyer and a sales associate in the retail industry and has been highly sought after for her expertise in advising clientele. For the past 15 years, she has degrees in design and visual communication, and she's studied extensively with experts, world-renowned authors and stylists. And so I'm excited to hear what you have to say. And, why don't we start with you giving a little bit of background? What are these style archetypes that you have for men? What's the purpose of them? How do you work with them, with men?
Yeah, great. Well, I think that there's sort of two main concepts that I start with. And one is that basically your clothing has the ability to visually communicate. And it really is a very powerful way to communicate. And we are processing information on all these unconscious levels that most of us don't realize. So we're sort of designed biologically as humans to recognize visual communication. And it kind of goes back to, really early on, where we're programmed to recognize danger and we're programmed to recognize advantage.
Yeah.
So you kind of take these like very basic scientific concepts, and actually there have been many studies shown that, color has a huge psychological impact on us, as does texture, pattern, line. So basically what I specialize in is just developing someone's visual communication.
Wow. So interesting because when I work with men on what I would call more of a visual communication, or my style of visual communication, I really do agree. There's this biological experience that we have of each other that gets activated from the moment we see each other. And what I tend to focus on is, what are those, how do you feel about other people? How do you feel about yourself? What are your beliefs, and how those then get conveyed in their physical presence or energetic presence. But I love, the first thing that someone also sees when you walk in a room is the clothing that you put on your body.
Absolutely. It's kind of like the first layer, because I also, believe that energetically and through facial expressions, and that we're communicating in all these ways, like you mentioned, body language.
Mm-hmm.
And, sort of the first layer of communication is indeed the clothing that we wrap ourselves in.
Yes.
It's the way that we present ourselves to the world.
Yeah.
So yes, that
right.
is
And I
where
know men and women both have come to me and, kind of felt upset by, well, if someone's going to judge me by what I'm wearing, then so be it, then they don't deserve me or something. And, I can get that too. There's a part of me that feels like, I'm a kind of hippie at heart and I don't want to be judged for my external appearance. But at the same time, it does say something about, God, sometimes I have 12 thoughts at the same time. It does say something about how we take care of ourselves, about who we are. And, when I've seen men dress in a kind of very much more casual or sweatpants or kind of beat up shirts and holy things like that. Like, there's one aspect of that conveys I'm a relaxed guy. There's another aspect that convey, I don't take care of myself. And if we're together, I'm not going to necessarily take care of you either. So, it's so interesting, all of the different pieces of this. So, what do you want to start with the outline or kind of overview of the 5 archetypes, or do you want to dive into one at a time? What feels better?
Well, I think that before I do that, I would appreciate just addressing that point you just made, because I think it's a really important one. And I think that, we have to understand that this sort of outward appearance does not in any way negate like our inner depth and the importance of, having values and having morals and having the ability to then, take whatever we want, like into the material plane. So our ability to communicate, our ability to show care and concern. But ultimately, I would agree with you that how we take care of ourselves is very much communicated in how we dress and paying attention to that, because and I think that it's totally valid to want to go deeper and to really point out that there definitely has been a lot of damage caused by the fashion industry, a lot of unfair practices, and that for a lot of people, they don't go any deeper. Yep. So I just want to say that absolutely, you cannot substitute inner depth for this outward appearance. However, it is important, I think, to show and demonstrate that actually, this is a really real part of our existence here. Like we are, humans, we live on the material plane. We participate in this reality. And part of how we do that is by interacting with the material world.
So well said. So well said. I love that. Right. Yeah. Validating the depth and the values and all of those other parts that, this piece does not invalidate any of that.
Exactly. Yeah. So thanks. So then, I can just sort of dive in to the 5 style archetypes. And so basically the first one is, it's called Take Me Seriously, I Mean Business. So this is basically, it really communicates that I mean business. I know what I'm doing. I'm serious about what I'm doing, and it conveys that in the clothing.
Okay. And so just to back up a little bit, as you're saying, I mean business, and this is, what was the other title you gave it?
Take me seriously.
Okay. And so as you're describing this archetype, is it a way that is it specific clothing that a man would wear, or it's more you help a man style, various clothing, but in this image, in this archetype?
It's absolutely very specific clothing. It's specific color, it's specific pattern, it's specific texture. So again, like this whole concept is basically how to take these statements and to translate it into a visual.
Yes.
So this first style archetype does deal with absolutely its color and its style. So, and I can talk more about that, or I can kind of dive into this one, or I can just sort of say what the 5 are.
Yeah, let's do what the 5 are. And then I imagine, we can guide people back to your website also for different visual examples because, that's a little bit lacking in the podcast style.
Right.
But that would be great for men to be able to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second one is called Notice Me, I'm a Risk Taker. And so with this archetype, these are sort of the boldest, brightest colors that you can carry and that still relate to you. I didn't quite talk about this, and we can if we have time, but it's called visual congruency. And this is like such an important piece of getting your own personal style down, is to understand this concept of visual congruency. So everything that you wear has to relate back to you. Otherwise, the clothes will wear you, or you'll kind of just be like free marketing for the clothing company.
And when you say it all has to relate back to you, what do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is called visual congruency. So a really basic example is the use of black. So if you don't have black in your inherent coloring, so already going on in your like hair, basically, or even your skin, it doesn't really relate to you. So same thing with hair. So say someone has wavy hair. So you can repeat that element of a wave in their clothing. So there's just these very basic concepts of how to repeat visual elements that you already have going on. And it's like, we want to look at the skin tone, and then we want to find the right color for their skin, for their hair, for their eyes.
Right.
So for example, not everyone's best neutral is black. Some people's best neutral is navy, and actually some people's best neutral, if they have very dark skin, is a lighter color. So it really depends on their skin tone and their hair and their eye.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that part.
Yeah. So with the Notice Me, I'm a Risk Taker, this is kind of where you really want to play up the brightest colors you can wear, the patterns, the textures. So this is what you want to communicate with this. So it's great to use this at a networking meeting, for example. You really want to stand out in a crowd.
Right. Though this one seems like such an interesting question to me of, having worked with men for a long time, there is a whole world of pickup artists where men are, trying to get women's attention through, they call it peacocking and putting on really bright clothing, and they wear interesting hats or rings or things like that. And so it's interesting to imagine going to a networking event and trying to get attention through boldness, but also being like the first one you said, I'm more of a professional. So do you blend these archetypes sometimes as well?
That's a great question. And absolutely, you can absolutely do that. I mean, like, for example, with the first look, take you seriously, I mean business, you can definitely choose like an accessory or even like a really bright shirt color to kind of just give a nod to, well, yes, take me seriously, but I also have a playful side, or I also have a creative streak, or whatever it is. And absolutely, kind of depending on you and depending on your audience, you can very much be specific with what you choose. And the sort of Notice Me, I'm a Risk Taker, of course, like in the dating world, that's going to be sort of a different, it's same but different. So in a networking event, you're not necessarily trying to, impress someone with like your hat, but you are, it's more of like, which I get that's a strategy, and I think it's probably effective for a lot of guys. But if you can really successfully dress like boldly, combine 3 different patterns together, you're going to impress people more with a skill rather than just like, I'm going to wear this like funny ring or a hat to get, to be like a conversation starter.
Yes. Right. It just makes me laugh too, right? This way where then going back to what we said in the beginning, I've met men before and women too, who they have this presentation and this visual appeal. And then you start talking to them and their words, or like we said before, their depth or their values just don't back it up or don't align. So again, it goes back to this way for me of, okay, you can't substitute one for the other, but this is what's going to capture attention.
Right. And then I think like going back to visual congruency, I mean, visual congruency is not just about your eyes, skin, and hair. It's also about what you have going on the inside.
Yes.
And that's why I really like to get to know my clients as well, like really get to know who they are, and then what are their lifestyle needs, and how can we, kind of marry those two. Because, if you don't have a lot of depth, then I wouldn't necessarily put you in clothing that says you do, if that makes any sense.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? It's kind of like when I work with men too, if they're not naturally, there's different styles or different archetypes, I would say, right? Where some men have this kind of, I call it a superpower, right? Where they're really serious or really deep, and others are really funny, and others are really heartfelt. And not to say that we don't all have all of those, but there's a natural one that tends to stand out. And I say that, trying to use another man's lines, like a pickup line is kind of like a thin, tall man wearing a short, wider man's pants, right? They don't fit because it's not actually expressing who you are. And so then it seems really awkward and strange. So I love that you get to know your clients' personalities to be able to shape and match the outside to the inside.
Absolutely. And that is absolutely a very, just as important as what your eye, hair, and skin is what you have going on the inside, your personality, like you said, your depth or more heart or more humor. That's definitely a part of the style formula.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay. What's number 3?
Okay. So number 3 is I'm credible and trustworthy. So this is, I call this look really great for a job interview. And so or perhaps a second date, because what it does visually is it creates a loop so that whoever you're with is going to keep looking into your eyes. So in this look, we really reference your eye color, and it's just, biology, it's just science. So when we play with that, we kind of create a visual loop with your eye, and how you build trust with someone is through eye contact. It's one of the very important ways that you build trust.
Yeah.
So in this look, we really, that's sort of the guiding force are your eyes, your eye color.
I love it. Right. And to keep bringing people's attention back to that eye contact and that way of connecting, which again, I do a lot of that work with men on my end to be able to sustain that kind of eye contact without nervousness and with this relaxation, without needing to fill the space. Right. And then you have that visual aspect of actually bringing people's attention back to their eyes. I like that.
Right. It kind of really supports it. So, if your goal is to kind of increase eye contact, this creates a really strong visual support for that. It's kind of going to really just be a natural, organic thing, rather than, perhaps having this subtle like insistence, like you need to look into my eyes. It kind of allows it to happen more organically.
That's so great.
Yeah. So that's look number 3. And then look number 4 is called I'm approachable. So in some ways, it's a little bit opposite of the first look, which is I'm serious, I mean business. And you mentioned earlier, like combining looks. This is sometimes can be a great thing to incorporate with the I'm serious, because, if you're really and there's certain instances where you want to be intimidating, and you can absolutely do that, with your clothing. Yeah. But there's others when you want to be more approachable, and I call this a kind of good first date look. And then there's other business instances which this would really come in handy. So I'm approachable relates more to your skin tone and your natural blush tone.
Which I imagine a lot of men don't really think about, and having you around to point that out is very helpful, right? Like, for a lot of men, it's like they've never put on concealer or any of those things that we as women have to match our skin.
Yeah, like, what does that mean? Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, skin is just your skin. I mean, and even in our skin, we have a lot of different tones within our skin. Yeah. And, at this point, I just have to say, like, it does get fairly complicated. And so one service that I offer is I make a visual library for men. So they don't have to necessarily digest all of this information. It's like, okay, here's my approachable folder, or here's my first date,
Great.
And they, it's easy. And I help them organize their closet. So definitely make it simple and easy.
And just totally imagine, like, here's the I'm approachable section, here's the I'm bold section, here's the take me seriously section. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. How we do it.
Awesome.
And then the last archetype is I'm supportive. I'm in a supporting role. So this could be good if you are a mentor and say, it's the day that your mentee is giving their speech or their talk or their presentation to your group, to your business group. And you want to be in a more supportive role. You don't really want to detract from this person. Or, perhaps you're at a sporting event for your kids. I mean, there's a lot of different times that you can use this look. And it's just, I still am confident and put together, but I'm in a supportive role. So you really want to sort of downplay your seriousness here. And everyone is going to have, everyone inherently has either a more serious or a more approachable look. Mm-hmm. It's kind of called the approachable versus formal scale. And some people are just naturally more formal. Yeah. And you really need to help them downplay that, especially with this look. And then some people are just naturally way more approachable. And, I'm just going to say, like, in biology, men are already less approachable than women. Mm-hmm. The feminine is always more approachable and the masculine is less. So, but that said,
I think there are examples in the animal kingdom, right, where the men have the more colorful and they shake their tail feathers and they do all of that. But it is interesting that in the human realm, right? I mean, a lot of men, I think some men I've talked to feel good, right, about being the approacher or being the one who is more active in that role. And then there are also men I've talked to who really struggle with that and feel like, God, there's so much pressure. It's always on me to be the one. And so I just also wondered, would this be one, that could actually help men be approached more or be more approachable? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is like kind of why I call myself a style scientist, because it's really fun. Like, you really can play with this like scientific data. And absolutely, as a man, depending on, your look, I mean, some men, if they have a very high contrast in their inherent visual appearance, they may find that they're way less approachable. And it's true, they are. And this look can absolutely help mitigate that. And, or, regardless of your inherent visual impression, which is what I call the A to F scale, you can use this data. I'm in a supportive role, and you will absolutely appear more approachable.
So fascinating. I haven't really, thought about it to this degree. And then the question that comes up for me is, even as a woman, and as a mother to get out of the house with clothing on sometimes it's just like as much as I can manage, And so how do you work with men who are like, wow, well, this is all really interesting, but for me to put that much time and attention into this is really not something I've ever considered,
Well, I mean, that's why, this is a professional service, and so I basically make it really easy for them. I mean, of course, it is about building an education, so you're going to have to spend some time on it, but I mean, all these little minutia details, that's why I make the visual library. So they don't really have to understand it as much as they just, it's basically set up for them. And then over time, they can kind of start to understand it, because it is actually a lot to integrate and digest. And so I totally get that. And that's why, organizing the closet is a super important aspect of this, and then having like a visual library.
Right.
So there are ways to make it a lot more accessible and easy. Like, you don't have to sit there and think, oh my gosh, okay, so I'm going to wear this shirt and then that and that and that and that. Yeah, that can definitely.
Right. And I also imagine that it becomes more apparent as you're working with someone what the value of this is, right? I mean, for you to go into a business meeting or on a date or, something that feels important and actually be dressed the part, such that you feel better, you feel more confident, you feel more available for connection, any of these things, if you're presenting a business deal or any of that, it's like, oh, right. When I start to put it in that context, then it actually starts to make sense that I would spend some time and attention on this. Because it's making a first impression.
Right. I mean, I think it does both. It ultimately gives you more confidence in whatever your role is, or whatever, your day brings you. And you can know that you're aligning your outward presentation with your inner. So basically, you won't have to work as hard to accomplish what you want.
Right.
When you align your outward appearance with your intention, it really allows that, it just supports that all the more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so great. And right, while it takes a little bit of time and attention to actually put some focus on this, then to walk around in the world and more easily convey what you want to convey. I mean, that is priceless.
Exactly. And that's sort of the whole point. It's like, yes, for some people it may seem a little bit annoying or overwhelming to have to deal with it, but ultimately, the more you line your life up with what you really want, the more easier you're going to attract those experiences. You're going to attract the abundance, you're going to attract the lovers or the family or whatever it is that you want. I mean, ultimately, this work supports that 100%.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I love it. I'm just actually thinking of a recent conversation I had with one of my clients where we were working on his online profile, and I asked him what he wanted to convey, right? He sent me these images of him, and before I even gave him a response, I realized, oh, well, I want to know what he's attempting to convey so that when I share with him, this is the impression I'm getting, I know how it lines up with what he's attempting to convey, rather than putting my assumption, on him that he should be this way or he should be communicating this through his visual appearance. And it was just such an interesting process because we got into it, and part of what he said was, I haven't really thought about what I want to convey. And, from there, we really actually went deeper into some pretty, I think, deep places of whether he felt okay. He was conveying a little bit more of his playful, creative side. And yet when I looked at him, I said, wow, but you also have this rich depth, you're philosophical and psychological, and you're also really professional, and I'm not getting those pieces. And so then we got into what he felt comfortable conveying, and that he had this judgment about himself, that he shouldn't be too serious or take himself too seriously, or it would look arrogant or something like that. So I'm just realizing the vortex almost, that starts to open up, both whether you approach it from the inner or the outer. There's just so much more to see and understand about ourselves and how we convey ourselves in the world.
Well, right. And so there's this little thing I do sometimes. It's called unpacking your visual backpack. And, it's like there's all messages and beliefs that we've internalized about visual appearance. And sometimes those are, very explainable.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're not. It's like at some point in our lives, we just made an assumption and a belief, I should never wear green. And like, if you really think about it, you're like, that's because, my grandma Betty told me, who knows? Like, we can have these negative associations, but that can come up in work sometimes. You'll be like, actually, this is a great color on you. And they're like, oh, no way. And so there is some of that comes up. It's like these, these things we kind of cling to. I mean, I think that will always happen.
Yeah.
In any kind of like
I was going to
work.
say, right, how interesting it is that it points back to these identities and who we think of ourselves to be,
right.
Versus who others perceive us to be. Which, you and I were talking about, wow, it would be really amazing to do a workshop together or something where we actually get to explore both the inner and the outer.
Totally. And it's cool too, because in that context, and this is why I like doing workshops, is because you can actually get in groups and let other people tell you what they're perceiving about you.
Right.
Because you may think that you're saying one thing to the world, but when you hear it reflected back to you, I don't know if you know David Data, but he's really big on this. It's like, okay, what's the read from the room?
That part,
he's
yes.
like, how are other people perceiving you?
Yes.
Not necessarily like your visual appearance, but just how are other, and when you have like, several people saying like, yeah, that's really what I'm getting, then you tend to believe it more than just, so it is kind of nice to have that reflection. I definitely consider myself a professional and that I have a pretty accurate opinion about, how you are presenting yourself. However, I think just like being in a group can be invaluable, like hearing other people's opinions and experiences of you.
Yeah. And I'm just, again, also seeing the overlap in our work where I sometimes do with men a first impression activation session, right? How to create a first impression that has, whether it's women or colleagues or whatever, perk up and be interested and feel that either that kind of safety or trust or attraction or whatever a man is going for in those ways. And so, right, that could be a really fun thing for us to do too, the first impression piece around what men are portraying in their outer world, in their appearance, and then in their inner world and energetic. So I love this. I love the overlap for us and how we can support men together. And I'm curious, what do you, if you were to leave men with something, this is really clearly just a start, and we'll send them back to your website, like I said, but what in this moment feels important for you to leave men with?
I think that just, really being curious about how the visual world can really support them and work for them in achieving their goals.
Awesome. Yeah. And more, doing this work with men more and more, I really do see that sometimes one of the hardest things for me to say to a man is, your visual impression is not like I take the time to get to know you because I care about you and I want you to have what you want in the world and I want you to do well in your work and with women, but other people are not going to give you the time of day, right? If this is the visual impression you're giving. And I realize how that can actually feel scarier or edgier for me to communicate to a man than sometimes saying, something about, the way his words are coming out or his tone of voice or his posture or something like that. So thank you for doing work that, on the surface could sometimes seem like it doesn't necessarily go as deep, but in reality, I would say this is a really profound part of how people, engage in relationship with each other.
I agree. Doing this work can be, well, I would say it is. It's very powerful, and it has a very deep impact on your life. And it also can be, it can be a little more simple. It doesn't, it seems like it might take a lot of time, but actually, it doesn't. And once you kind of get yourself dialed in, it's just like, all right, I have this piece down. And of course, there's always circumstances and things that change, and trends change, but just kind of doing the foundational work can be a game changer. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. And where can men find you? I'll put the link under, but let's just speak it too.
Yeah, so kgriffinstyle.com. That is my website.
So K, the letter K, and then GRIFFIN style.com.
That's correct.
Awesome.
So all my contact information will be there, but just, you can email me, kgriffinstyle@gmail.com, or contact me through my website.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. And we're going to be putting our heads together to think about what we can offer together for men who are local to the Bay Area. So keep an eye out for that as well. And thanks for doing this with me.
Thank you so much, Shana. It's been a pleasure.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.